this, so we have it all online so students can come. So I'm going to, because I forgot to press that button, I'm really glad I remembered. We have Bruce Cohen here, producer of Milk, joining us at Utah Valley University. And I'm going to ask you a few questions, just a typical sort of Q&A type thing after a movie. And then we're just going to have a few people come here and sit down. And whenever you start to get tired, just let us know if you're down to a last question, and we will be. We have it all online so students can come. So I'm really glad I remembered. Okay, hold on. Joining us at Utah Valley. Let me see what's going on here. Got rid of that. That was
good. You sounded good on the rebound.
Yeah. Tell you what was happening is I had a screen open where this is sort of, so it's relaying through. Yeah. Okay, so
just don't be alarmed. I'm just turning my air conditioning off so I can hear a little better. Okay.
That's it. He's out of here. Okay. Well, my first question is, you won an Oscar for American Beauty, which is another one of many of your films are among my favorite films, and very often when somebody is on the top of the world like that, they find a passion project that they pursue, and to me, Milk feels like that sort of project, and I'm just wondering if that's the case, or how did you bring this to the screen, and what did it require?
It absolutely was the case that this was a passion project. Even though I had not developed it, it did come to me and my producing partner, Dan Jenks, at the time, who we also produced American Beauty together. And I had been very active in political activism for many, many years, and producing movies and LGBT activism were really sort of the two great loves of my life. They were my passions, and I really found that they fed off each other in that all the having so much fun but working so hard on making films really would inspire me to go out and in my spare time do activism, and then the LGBT activism always would recharge my creative juices and get me excited to do movies again. So it was overwhelming to me in a really beautiful way when Lance Black, who wrote Milk, he actually knew Dan well and knew me a little bit at the time, although we've become very close friends since and have done several other political projects together. He had written this script. He was looking for, he'd actually shown it to Gus Van Sant. Gus wanted to direct it. He didn't have a producer, and he was looking for producers. And the moment he mentioned the idea, I was so stunned, because I was like, wow, these two great loves of my life are going to combine. And I'm going to get to produce a film that tells the story of Harvey Milk. And it reminds me of a quick but seminal story that I will tell is shortly after that, we went up to San Francisco to do a preliminary location scout. We didn't have financing for the film yet, but we wanted to go to Castro Street, the corner of Castro and Market, which is in the film. And we were standing on the corner of Castro and Market. It was myself and Dan Jenks and Lance Black and Gus Van Sant. And 4 gay teenagers came out of the subway, and they were about 18 years old, gay guys, and they recognized Gus. So they're involved in the world. They knew it was Gus Van Sant. They got very excited. They came running up to Gus, and they said, "You're Gus Van Sant?" And he's like, "Yes." And they said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "We're getting ready to make a movie about Harvey Milk." And they said, "Who's Harvey Milk?" And they were, as I said, openly gay teenagers. They were standing in Harvey Milk Plaza on the corner of Castro and Market, and they hadn't heard of Harvey Milk. And it was this moment, it sort of gave us all chills in a good way, because the 4 of us had the same thought right away of, this is more than just a film. This is really now a calling, and we have an obligation to try and tell this story for future generations, because if this story doesn't get told, people aren't going to know in history who Harvey Milk was and what he did. And so I think that feeling that we were doing this for all the kids out there who weren't going to learn about him in school and were never going to hear about him if the movie didn't get made, that really inspired us as we were making the film to try and tell his story as true as possible and make the best film possible.
Well, you did an extraordinary job. So Lance wrote it on spec.
Yes, Lance wrote it on spec. That is correct. Yeah.
And so obviously you give credit to Rob Epstein at the end. And can you tell me, I mean, because I mean, that's another amazing film. I mean, it's so great that there's such a great documentary and such a great narrative film about Harvey Milk. And can you tell me sort of, was there a collaboration with him, or was it mostly inspirational, or what happened there?
So let me start by asking, how many people do you have in the audience there about, would you say?
I would say close to 40, maybe not that many.
All right, and so now show of hands, and then Duane will report. How many of you have seen the documentary, The Life and Times of Harvey Milk?
We have about, looks about 8.
Okay, well, so I would encourage, for those 8, if you haven't seen it in a while, and for the other 32 of you, I would highly recommend watching it as soon as possible. It's really, we're very proud of the collaboration with Rob and with the documentary. I think they're beautiful companion pieces. I love the experience of watching Milk, the movie, first, as most of you have just done. And now when you watch the documentary and seeing the real people and seeing how much, on the one hand, how much of what you saw is so true to what really happened, but on the other hand, how, like any film, you know, we could only tell one certain part of the story, and there's so much more to the story. Gus was friends with Rob. I had known Rob. You know, we were all very proud of and huge believers in the documentary, which had won the documentary Oscar several years before. But unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, in our society today, and as sad as it is, but it's sort of true, books, newspaper articles, the news, documentaries, they just don't have the reach out to the mass population that film and television narrative programs have. And, you know, you see this time and time and again where, I mean, an example I often talk about is Schindler's List and the Holocaust. And that, you know, as much as there has been on the Holocaust and as much documentary footage and as much as you assume people know about it, it really takes a movie like Schindler's List that's then sort of the record that is how people will be able to refer to that as history goes by. And so the documentary, unfortunately, just hadn't had the reach that you'd want it to have. And those kids on Castro and Market still didn't know who Harvey Milk was. But so it was very important to us that we have a good collaboration with Rob and with the documentary, and that we have access to the material. We use some of the footage from the documentary. And so we actually really did have a great collaboration with him and wanted to make sure that we especially thanked him at the end of the film.
Yeah. And was some of that, the use of that archival stuff, was that written in the original script, or did that come with Gus? That came with Gus and the brilliant cinematographer Harris Savides, who unfortunately is no longer with us. And it totally killed two birds with one stone, because it's a great metaphor, because, you know, the two main elements of film production is the creative side and the financial side. And, you know, the times when you have problems is when those two sides bump into each other and struggle against each other. And the times that you often can really do something beautiful is when you figure out a way that creative and financial can be working together. I mean, the cliche is show business, and those are really the two words right there. There's the show part and there's the business part. And so this was an example of creatively, we loved the idea of really integrating the real footage. And what Gus and Harris wanted to, we sort of started from the documentary footage,
And where we really started was at the very end of the film, the Candlelight March, because we had that real footage of the real march. You're never going to be able to recreate that and come up with anything as evocative and as emotional and as true, because it literally is the real footage. So that was an example of like, okay, how do we then create the whole movie, the look of it and the feel of it, so that we can shoot our actors holding their candles and at the front of the march with 100, actually we ended up having 1,000 free people came to be a part of the march that night, with our 1,000 people today trying to look like 1978. And then when we cut right from there to the real footage, that it'll feel like it's all the same movie. And so that principle guided us through wanting to do that, getting this great atmosphere of Castro and of all the stuff that really happened, and news footage, and Anita Bryant, who plays herself by the magic of film. You know, we didn't use an actress. Same with Senator Feinstein. You know, we ended up figuring out a way of, we don't have to cast them and have someone play them. We just use the real footage of them. Ended up, you know, it brought such great layer of authenticity creatively, and it was a huge help to the budget. We could never have afforded to recreate all of that stuff. And, you know, we couldn't turn all of Castro Street into the 1970s in a million years. So we were able to, by integrating the stock footage with the footage that we were using, come up with something that saved us a ton of money and was also really beautiful and important creatively. And I'll just say on the I got to greet and thank the 1,000 extras who had come for free that night. They were working all night long. It was cold in San Francisco. They were not getting paid at all. So we really wanted to make them feel an important part of the film and let them know how much it meant to us that they were there. And as I was talking to them about recreating it today and thinking of the footage of the real Candlelight March, something just struck in my head to ask a show of hands, you know, were any of you there? And over 100 of them had been at the actual candlelight vigil exactly 30 years before, and then had come back to be a part of recreating it.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I mentioned this to the students starting it, and I mentioned this to you when we met before, that I grew up, you know, in that area. I mean, south of San Francisco, but my dad was a big Harvey Milk supporter. And though I was 12 years old, I was very aware, you know, when he was elected, we celebrated. When he was killed, we were devastated. And so to watch all this stuff, I mean, it's so dead on, the production design and the way that we move from the archival. It's so moving to me to watch it. It's just so nostalgic. So let me ask, I'm going to ask 2 more questions to you, and then we'll turn it over to these guys. First, you've done a lot of real big studio projects. Well, you've done big studio projects, you've done medium studio projects. This, did you try to bring this to studios? I know Focus produced it, Universal released it. What was the reaction you got? And how did you finally get it out?
We, when Dan and I first met with Gus and Lance, we thought that it would be a real struggle to get it made. And in fact, there had been another Harvey Milk project that had been developed for almost 20 years. It was actually it was a greenlit movie. It was Warner Brothers. It was going to shoot in like the early 80s. Oliver Stone was directing, and Robin Williams was going to star as Harvey Milk. And it came within like a month of shooting, and then for some reason it didn't get greenlit to shoot. And then they kept trying over and over again for 20 years to get it made, and they never did. So we knew it was an uphill battle. I mean, it's a gay politician who gets killed at the end. So like, there's no genre there that like people pay money to invest in movies. So, and especially, you know, even more so 8 or so years ago when we were making the film. So in our first conversation, we said, it's all about the actor playing Harvey, because, you know, it's their movie. If we, you know, the dream was like, if we do it right, you know, you can maybe get someone nominated for an Oscar, and it needs to be someone who both, with sort of three things. We're looking for someone who creatively is absolutely brilliant in the part. There was no way to even think about compromising to get some sort of movie star if they weren't right. So they had to be creatively perfect. But number two, it had to be someone who had value to put butts in seats, that actually someone that could finance a movie around. And then number three, sort of a version of one and two, was we were looking for that moment of, you say to the studio, so-and-so as Harvey Milk, and immediately we wanted their reaction to be, okay, that's a movie I want to make. So we had like pictures spread out on the table and like this list of, you know, the male movie stars, and we started going through them, and there were some ideas we were excited about, and when we got to Sean Penn, we all just stopped and we were like, wow, Sean Penn as Harvey Milk, that it just immediately felt exciting to us, and we felt like it would be exciting to financiers, and that it met both bars. And then as we're talking about that, Lance had brought a book of original photos from Castro of the time, and he was leafing through them, and we stopped on one of Harvey from profile, and it could have been Sean. Sean was a lot shorter than Harvey, but other than that, they actually had a strong physical resemblance to begin with. And it was sort of, that was like, you know, the heavens parting when we're like debating Sean Penn, and then he lands on that picture, and we're like, well, there's our Harvey Milk. So Gus called Sean, and Sean wanted to do it. And so it's still, we didn't have studios batting down our doors, but we were able to get financing for the film and move forward. We took a real attitude, all of us, especially when we had Sean. What we were saying to financiers is, we're making this movie and we're shooting it in 4 months, and are you doing it with us or not? And because we just believed in it so strongly, and you know, we weren't going to let anyone stop us. And so we did end up finding groundswell, and then Focus came on board.
That's great. I've done that. I've had that attitude, and all it means is I end up spending a lot of my credit card. No.
Never spend your own money with that attitude.
I'll have one more question for you. And you came up as an AD, and we train our students here a lot about production and all aspects of it. And so I'd love you to talk about, but I don't think any of them are really too aware of the DGA training program, which you came up through. Am I right? And can you maybe talk a little bit about that, and then segue that into how your background in production as an AD has helped you as a producer?
Well, the discussion is a double-edged sword, because the Directors Guild training program is an amazing program to train you to be assistant directors. And it gives you, if you get in, it's hard to get into, but if you get in, they find you the work. It's a 2 or 3 year program where they assign you to film and television shows. And when you complete enough days, if you graduate, you're automatically in the Directors Guild, and you can start getting work as a second assistant director, and then you move up to first assistant director, and then usually to unit production manager, and then to line producer. So it's an amazing career path, and if you're interested and excited in that whole area of the business, you should absolutely apply. You can do the applications online. I think the deadline is actually like November, December each year. So the timing's now, and then the test is in January, and they let you know in the spring. The double-edged sword part is because I actually firmly believe, having had the good fortune to go through this as my career path, first assistant directing is as good training to be a creative producer as you can possibly get. But unfortunately, it's not considered a career path at all. The studio system a long 30, 40, 50 years ago started splitting off into line producers, who are the people that do the budgets and the schedules and hire the crew, and creative producers, who are the people that develop the material and find the scripts and hire the directors and put the movies together. And unfortunately, hindsight 50 years later being 2020, that's completely the wrong system. That a producer has to have the show and the business. And this sort of bifurcation of line producers who know all the money side but didn't get trained to think creatively, and creative producers who have come up thinking creatively but can't solve the problems of a budget and schedule, is just not a good system. And so unfortunately, first assistant directors don't often get a chance to segue into creative producing. I was very, very fortunate because I had beautiful mentors named Kathy Kennedy, Frank Marshall, and Steven Spielberg, who are about as good of mentors as you're going to have. And then actually, the only reason why I even knew them is because the first job as a trainee that I was assigned to, the first film, I had done one TV show, and then the first film I was assigned to was The Color Purple, and they were the producers. So that changed my entire life that I got that job. And they gave me a chance to be a creative producer. But then when I got to be a creative producer, I say it sort of half kiddingly, that you shouldn't be allowed to be a creative. Put it this, I can't understand how anyone could be able to be a creative producer or know how to be a good creative producer if you haven't been a first assistant director, which of course hardly any of them have, because that's not how the system works. But there's the first assistant director is the general on the set. You're the director's eyes and ears. You're scheduling, planning everything for the director. You have to be completely creative as well as completely organizationally and production and budget and schedule oriented at the same time. And so it's the ultimate training for, I felt, having gone through it, for becoming a creative producer. And it served me really, really well, because most creative producers just don't have the production experience and don't know how to solve problems on a day-to-day basis on a set for their director. And so directors have really appreciated and been surprised by, when I come along, they're used to having to go to the line producer, but in my case, I can help them with all of that because I came up as an assistant director. So the long and short of it being, unfortunately, if you want to be a creative producer or a director, I can't in good conscience tell you to go into the training program and to try and be an assistant director, because the odds are so against you that you get to make that transition. But it's really too bad, because assistant directing, A, is an amazing career in and of itself, and B, it really is good training for creative producing if you get lucky enough to make that segue.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I'm going to open it up here. They're just going to come down and sit down and introduce themselves. Please let them know who you are and ask a question. So who's first? Okay. I asked all the questions?
Yeah, my questions already got answered.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Skylar. I'm a student here. And first of all, thank you. This is really cool, being able to do this. It's a really cool experience. So thanks for your time.
Absolutely.
And I love the film too. I'd never seen it before, and it was amazing. So my question to you is, you just mentioned in that creative producer position that it's necessary to, maintain that creativity and, at all times and with the director. In this film, what were some of the things that required, maybe some extra creativity or I don't know, solutions or problems and possible solutions that came while filming?
Period movies are always much, much harder, because you can't just turn the camera on anything and just shoot it. If you have a moment of inspiration, especially today with if you're shooting digitally, you're so mobile and so flexible, and you see a great moment, you just like turn the camera and get that guy on the street or whatever. But when you're doing a period film, you really can't do that, because everyone has to look like they're from 1978. The signs are wrong, the wiring's wrong, everything's wrong. So that was really, and I spoke to it a bit earlier with the stock footage as a solution, but that was the biggest challenge really on every scene. As you get to a location and you want to shoot the whole thing, but there's no way we have the time or the money to dress the whole set to become 1978. So it's getting specific with Gus in preparation of like which, so what part of City Hall do we actually need to see, so that we can create a scene that is really accurate and looks beautiful, but that we can afford to do and that we have time to shoot.
Was a lot of that on locations, or how much was done in the studio?
We were, it was almost all on location. I don't think we really built any sets at all, maybe just like a day or two here or there. And our main location was the camera store, and we actually used the real camera store, which was amazing.
Awesome.
It was a gift shop at the time, but I mean, everyone knew, it had come down through history that it was the camera store, and there was a mural of Harvey Milk on the store. It actually now is the Human Rights Campaign San Francisco offices, because sort of after we came in and used it in the film and sort of made it even more notable, they came in and said, this is history, and we want to not have it be a gift shop again. But so we did some construction in that. We sort of moved the gift shop out and put it back to look like it was. And we were, because there was a lot of historical reference, and because we wanted to match to the real footage, as I discussed, we put so much time and energy into making things as exactly like they were as possible. And in the camera shop, when they're all sitting around, I mean, those scenes, the posters on the wall, down to the size, the color, the font of everything you're seeing, it was exactly what was up there from the photos we saw. And there's 5 or 6 times in the movie where it happens. One of them that I'm remembering is right on the night that Harvey's won, where he pulls up on the motorcycle right at outside the camera store for the party. We would have these still photos. There's that moment of Harvey getting off the motorcycle, and we had a still photo, and we would set that shot exactly like the photo. We had matched extras in advance, so people were wearing exactly the same clothes, and that would sort of be the start of the shot. And then once Gus called action, we'd move from there. But we did that a couple different times, and to us, that was really our hope was that if we kept doing stuff like that, where we worked so hard to make it feel exactly like it was, that would really, you'd feel that as you were watching, and you'd feel, I mean, it's Sean Penn, not Harvey Milk, but you feel hopefully like you're really watching it happen just as it actually had.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we got other students here kicking me off the screen, but thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You have a good night.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Sam, and thank you so much for doing this. This is also my first time seeing it, and I was really excited to see it. I have a question. So having worked with like really fun directors like David O. Russell, Tim Burton, and Gus Van Sant, what is it that you really like to go for when you hire these directors? Is it more for the show, or do you like more like practical type people, or what's kind of your eye for directors, so to speak?
Well, my eye, in a perfect world, what I like my eye to be, and I don't always have the choice. Sometimes the director is on the project before I come on, but it's been one of the really honors and thrills of my career that I've gotten to work with these amazing folks, because I came up with Spielberg, and then between Sam Mendes on American Beauty and the directors you've mentioned, it's an amazing collection of artists, and that's certainly part of the thrill for me. I mean, to work with those types of folks, where your job is to really try to get into their heads as much as possible and find out. I mean, especially like you take Tim Burton, for example. It's like, how am I going to, in the quickest and most profound way, start figuring out like how Tim Burton is the mad genius that he is, and what does he need to make this movie, and then to start running around like a incredibly excited, crazy person to pull it all together for him. So the goal always is to have the absolute right director for the film, where that you're in such good hands, and that they have such a beautiful vision for the movie that then your job is just to help them get their vision on the screen. The much harder situation is when you're in situations, which we've all been in, and some producers more than others, where you're not really sure if the director has as good or strong a vision for the movie as you'd hope, and the job then becomes a second guessing, more inserting your own thoughts and the thoughts of other people into the process. But when you're working with a Sam Mendes or a Gus Van Sant or a David O. Russell or Tim Burton, you're pretty much doing none of that.
All right. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Hello. My name's Brian. I'm an aspiring director. I am also super gay, and I remember seeing Milk when it first came out, and it was the first time I heard of Milk as well. So I'm with those kids you saw down at the Castro. But it was super inspiring, and so I wanted to, first of all, thank you for making this movie. It inspired me to live openly and honestly, and so this was my second time seeing it. I had just watched the documentary last week to kind of be prepared, and there's one thing in this movie that's not in the documentary, and I was just curious about it. It caught my attention. But there's an implication in this movie that Supervisor Dan White was a closeted homosexual. And I was just wondering if that was a creative license, or if there's historical reference for that, and where in the creative process that came up.
It's funny because it's been a while since I've seen the film, but do you remember where we hear that in the film and who says it?
Yeah, so it's right after Dan White comes in and kind of talks to Harvey Milk and all of the campaign people. And as soon as he leaves, Harvey tells everybody that he believes that Dan is a closeted homosexual because he can feel the fear of living an open life emanating from him.
So we had it from several sources that Harvey had said that, and some of the people that were in the room, the real people, had said, clearly remembered that. So that's where we got it. I can't speak for why it was in the documentary, but Lance, who loves doing true story projects, and he's a fanatic for documentation and realism, and so we really worked very hard in the film to not include anything factual in dialogue unless we really could back up that those things had exactly happened. I mean, clearly some of the bedroom conversations between Harvey and Scott are just made up, but that's pretty much about it. Almost everything else that people are saying, we really talked to, because there were a bunch of people that are still around from the movie, including primarily Cleve Jones, who Emile Hirsch played, and Cleve was with us every second of the filming. So if he didn't specifically remember Harvey saying something, we don't really have Harvey saying.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Hey.
Hello.
My name is Austin Hawk, and I was sitting up there watching, and I had a question. You mentioned earlier that there was a time when you couldn't get the green light on the video, to start production on Milk. And I was wondering, because of the subject matter and because homosexuality is still kind of I guess, under persecution, was there anything like that kind of stood in the way, any sort of obstacles that got up because of the subject matter of the film?
I think we tried to avoid that kind of on purpose. You know, we were going to places that we thought would be interested in doing this film, and certainly Gus and Sean had a lot of fans, and the screenplay was beautiful, and so we really didn't run into any of that. And then we went up to San Francisco to shoot it. So you know, so we did to some extent live in a nice bubble, but certainly always keenly aware that that's part of why the film was so important, is because you know, it is such an issue and continues to be such an issue, and anything we can do to get the word out would be really important. But actually, you know, I can't say that we ran into any instances of homophobia or you know, bullying or anything like that while we were making the film, which is beautiful and exciting in and of itself. So
yeah, definitely cool.
But again, we were at the corner of Castro and Market, so it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were the hometown making this film, and in San Francisco, you know, Harvey, other than the 18-year-olds who were too young, but there were so many people there who he was so beloved, straight and gay, and who he meant so much to, and were so supportive of us making the film, including Gavin Newsom, who you know, was the mayor at the time, and who, you know, was actually, it hadn't happened yet, but was about to become, you know, one of the leading LGBT activists. And so we had a lot of support on every level for the movie.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, thank you. I love the film, and I really appreciate you coming here tonight and doing this.
My pleasure.
Hi, my name's Riley, and I just have a couple questions. I'm just a very inexperienced filmmaker, and so I was wondering how you got interested in going into the film industry and how you made that transition from doing maybe like the low budget stuff, getting into what you're doing now.
Well, I just always loved film. I hadn't really realized until I got to college that you could actually have a career in it. There was a lot less awareness years and years and years ago when I was in school that film was even a career you could do unless you sort of grew up in LA. But when I got to college and realized, oh, this thing that I've always really loved, you actually can earn a living at it. It got me interested, and I did a summer filmmaking course at NYU, and then this summer before my senior year in college, I went out to LA and got an internship, and actually it was there I heard about the Directors Guild training program, and so I moved out right after I graduated and got into that. And so for me, I mean, as I said, the first movie I worked on was The Color Purple, so I actually sort of started on big studio movies, and then over the years, I've kind of gone back and forth, which I really like to do. I mean, to me, you know, what I really get excited about the creative material itself and what the project is and what it has to say. So whether it's a really, really small budget or really, really big budget is not as important to me. And I actually really like doing both, because some of the things are exactly the same and some of the things are very different. But actually, every film you do is a whole new experience, because you're recreating the world of that movie. So unless you've made a movie in the same world before, you're kind of, you know, in a very exciting way, you're starting from scratch on each film.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Hi, Bruce. I'm Evan.
Hello, Evan.
I just wanted to back up what everybody else said. Really appreciate you doing this for us tonight. That's a awesome opportunity for us.
Absolutely.
So I had two questions about, well, the first one is your set decorating. I noticed you had a lot of cool color, and that's always kind of fascinated me, is, you know, how the set direction comes up with things that work into the themes of the film. And I was wondering, you know, it's a very warm film, a lot of browns and yellows and that kind of stuff. How much of that came from you trying to match the old footage versus themes you were actually trying to do, and creatively trying to get a message across through the color, I guess?
I think that's a great question, and it was a combination. The production designer, on what you're always hoping is that the production designer, the costume designer, and the cinematographer get along beautifully well and sort of form this exciting creative coalition where they start really wanting to plan out, what are the color schemes, what's the arc of the film as far as color goes and as far as look goes. And in the case of Milk, with Harris Savides and Bill Groom, who did production design, and Danny Glicker, who did costumes, because we also wanted to recreate how it had really been. They had so much archival material that they all got very excited in, what's that intersection of here's all the real stuff, and then how do we want to translate that into a movie that will really be exciting and vibrant today, but stay true to the past. But then at a certain point in pre-production, we hadn't started with it, the archival footage came in. And then once we realized, that shot of the Castro Street Fair that's in the script, we can actually use this real piece of footage we saw. Then it got more specific, because then that footage did start to define the look and the color palette and the feel for the movie a lot for us, because we really wanted our movie to match to that, not the other way around. But that continued to be a very, very exciting discussion. And so we put a lot of time and energy on the film into what everything would look like and feel like.
Absolutely. And kind of going into that, I'm curious about the technical side. How much trouble did you have matching the look and the feel of that archival stuff? Because it's all shot on old camera and the color isn't, what we're used to now, I guess. I'm used to now.
Harris, it was a thrilling challenge for him and very exciting. And we did a lot of tests in advance. Because it was all up to him to know and understand how much of that needs to be live on the set, and as far as the lenses he's using and the lighting he's doing, and then how much of that he can continue to add in post with adding the grain. And so we did so many tests on stock. We actually found this old Kodak stock that had been discontinued for many years, and calling all the different Kodak labs all over the country to find enough of this antique almost film that we could use. So there was a lot of pre-planning, because the idea is once you get on the set, you need to just, you don't want to get at the DP going, oh wait, we can't shoot that because it won't match our footage, but that never happened, because Harris was such a genius at this, and he sort of he always knew that what he was shooting, he would then be able to, in the lab, make it look like we wanted it to look like.
Great. Thank you very much. That's awesome.
So Duane, I should probably do 2 more questions.
Okay, that sounds great.
Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. My name's Matt.
Absolutely.
My question is, in the pre-production process, how did the project get going? I guess Lance was the writer. So did he bring you a finished script?
He had brought Gus a finished script, and then they brought us on, and then we all brought Sean on. And then once we were really the team, we went out to get the financing from there, and then we went into pre-production up in San Francisco.
Okay, so that was kind of your early creative team that was making the project that was going to turn into the piece of art that eventually would be the film.
Correct, but before that, Lance had been writing the script for years, and he had met Cleve Jones several years before, and Cleve had expressed his sadness and frustration that the Harvey Milk movie had never gotten made. And so Cleve started, and the other Harvey Milk movie had been based on a book, Life and Times of the Mayor of Castro Street by Randy Schultz, which was a very well-respected and a very impactful book when it came out. But that team, they had based the screenplays, all the many screenplays through the years, on the book. And weirdly, for whatever reason, I guess because they had the rights to the book, they had never actually gone back to all the people, many of whom were alive, and take firsthand accounts from the characters. And so Cleve had mentioned that to Lance. He said, you know, like that other movie, they never talked to me. And Lance said, you know, over the 18 years they've been trying to make that movie with all these different directors and all these different actors, no one's ever tried to find you and say, you know, your character is the second lead character in the film and you're right here. And Cleve was like, no one's ever tried. And so that gave Lance the idea. He's like, well, you know, if that other movie, I don't have the rights to that book, but I could have the rights to all the real people, none of whom have ever been interviewed before for a movie. So Cleve started putting Lance in touch with. Lance would fly up on his own dime to San Francisco, spend weeks there, met many of the people that you see portrayed in the film. Some were dead, but the ones that were alive. And he wrote the screenplay based on these firsthand interviews with all the real people.
Okay, so a lot of research in pre-production.
And years of research to get to the script that we finally read once he showed it to us.
So like in that process, what was the main focus for your research creatively as a producer?
I mean, a lot of it had been done because Lance had done it. But then once you bring on the creative team, you know, as along the lines of what I've been talking about, the main focus was let's anything that we can recreate, let's try and get as exact as we can. If we can shoot it where it really happened, let's shoot it there. If we can have the real people who were there 30 years ago, let's get them. If we can have people wearing the exact same pair of pants that they were wearing in the scene, let's do that. You know, there was a lot of time and effort was put into that, and Sean carried that all through in his research. You know, clearly it's an absolutely brilliant, transformative, Academy Award-winning performance.
Definitely.
And it's not a caricature or an imitation, but Sean really becomes Harvey. And in a lot of Harvey's speeches, the 3 or 4 main speeches in the film are on tape. And so Sean would watch those before we shot over and over and over and over again. And again, he's not imitating Harvey, he's becoming Harvey, but in the speeches, every breath, where if Harvey paused there, Sean pauses there. If Harvey breathes there, Sean breathes there. If Harvey makes a little bobble of a word, that's because, I mean, if that's Sean recreates that. So you can watch these speeches back to back and you can see that Sean was wanting to make it as exactly perfectly close to what Harvey did as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Absolutely.
All right, Bruce, we're going to let you go. That was fabulous. I'm sure you're tired and you got kids to tuck in, or I'm sure they're asleep.
Fortunately, my 4.5-year-old is well asleep, but she gets up in about 6 hours, so it's good timing.
Right. We definitely want to send you to bed. Thank you so much. We can't thank you enough. You've made a host of wonderful movies. Can't wait to see. We just recently worked on a project that Liz Destro helped us with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited for Young Americans.
Absolutely, me too.
And you've just been a pleasure to have here, and we all thank you. Let's give them a big hand.
Thanks for everything. Thank you so much. That's been a part of it, so thank you.
Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.